Hey, what's up? Look, you know what the title says, so let's dive into the unholy ways real-world religions and practices inspired some of the most terrifying Souls-like bosses I've seen. I think it's best to hit you with my heavy punch here, so let's talk about... Blasphemous is one of the best series for dark religious imagery. It takes heavy inspiration from Roman Catholicism, specifically Spanish Catholicism. I mean, I can make a whole video about these two games alone, but for now, let me just give you the appetizer. On the high snowy mountains of Blasphemous 1, you'll find a boss named Our Lady of the Charred Visage. Her name was Aurea, and it is said her beauty was divine. People were intoxicated by her appearance, constantly worshipping her to the point of obsession. As the kids would say, them boys were simps. It became unbearable for Aurea, so in an act of desperation, she would dip her visage into burning oil, disfiguring her appearance. The god of this universe, known as the Miracle, took notice of this act, and responded by making Aurea's burns eternal, transforming her into a smoldering golden masked saint. Her altar was built, and a cult formed, now known as the Covenant of Our Lady of the Charred Visage. Still, I'd probably take her on a date to Applebee's or something. Now, you would think her story would have some correlation to some religious figure or ceremony. That's kind of the point of this video, but not exactly. See, she was actually based on Maria Coronel. And if I mispronounce any of these names, forgive me. But she was a Spanish noble who disfigured herself with boiling oil to ward off an obsessive king, Peter the Cruel. While she wasn't recognized as an official saint, she's become a local icon of Spanish piety. Her body remains incorrupt on display in Seville to this day. However, there is a saint in history that perfectly mirrors the story of Aurea. Her name was Saint Rose. She was also known for her beauty, but in an act of devotion to God rather than desperation, she reportedly rubbed her face with pepper or lye to cause irritation and blemishes. It was rooted in extreme religious devotion, in the idea of rejecting vanity and worldly distractions. Aurea's charred visage mirrors the Catholic tradition of incorruptibility, where the bodies of saints typically don't decay. However, Blasphemous adds an eerie twist to this. See, her body decays, but her agony stays perfect and eternal, blessed by the Miracle. Gold was used to reflect the light of God, but in Blasphemous, this gold is melting and only covering half her face. It's about the duality of saints, a beautiful, holy exterior hiding a core of absolute self-inflicted suffering. Blasphemous always likes to twist these religious ideas into horrifying visages. Literally. One guy has an old man growing out of his belly. There's nothing to it, I just wanted to share that with you. Keep in mind, ladies and mostly gentlemen, according to my statistics, we're just getting started. Lady Microwave showed us suffering in faith through discarding her natural beauty. So what about faith through endless prayers? Benedicta of the Endless Orison is another boss from the same series who was cursed with eternal prayer. According to the lore, one night the coffin of a new cardinal arrived at the basilica. Benedicta and her sisters surrounded the body, preparing for their nightly ritual of prayers to guide the spirit into sanctity. Benedicta, however, would recite the apocryphal prayer. These ancient verses carried a terrible power. Whoever would utter its inked words would be imprisoned in eternal prayer, unable to stop, until they died of starvation. It's unclear why Benedicta would do such a thing. Perhaps she was in love with this priest and wished to guard him forever. Maybe she thought regular prayers wouldn't suffice this higher-ranking official, so she had to go with a premium prayer. Regardless of her reasoning, the Miracle witnessed her selfless act, but her reward was anything but holy. The Miracle refused to let the prayer end. Benedicta was chained in a constant state of limbo, neither living nor dead. Normally, the victim would pray until their throat gave out, their lungs collapsed, spilling these raps, and died from starvation. Benedicta was never relieved of her duties. When we find her, she's this ghostly figure upholding a dangling corpse from her veil. The concept art reveals that this corpse is Benedicta herself, but her spirit is the main component controlling the entire body. 2 times so far, we've seen the Miracle induce torture and suffering, which are disguised as blessings, and these people are believing it. When it comes to real-life connections, there's not a specific person that relates to Benedicta here. However, apocryphal prayers are a real thing. They were medieval texts that blend magical folk charms with Christian theology. They were used to treat ailments like snake bites and disease. While often dismissed by scholars as pagan or uneducated, evidence suggests they were a legitimate high-level religious practice, and they were used by the clergy to reinforce official Orthodox teachings. Now, I'm not sure how effective that really is. Like, I'm a Christian myself, but I don't think you should pray after getting bit by a king cobra. I think you should go to the hospital. In any case, Benedicta is in a perpetual state of 24/7 prayer. And that's also a real thing too. It's called the perpetual adoration, laus perennis. I think that's how it's pronounced. It was this practice of continuous prayer carried out by a choir or community, 24 hours a day, so that the worship never stopped. And people would take shifts to avoid burnout or similar situations. Benedicta is basically a one-woman perpetual adoration, locked in a loop of reciting prayers forever, until we come along to beat her senseless in record time. These are just two bosses in the Blasphemous series that have deeply rooted religious inspirations. Their suffering produced fruits of devotion and worship. Christianity and Catholicism are major themes of religious imagery inside many games. Like, if you want to have a religious theme for your game, pick one of the two, you'll do fine. However, some games tackle lesser-known traditions that harbor the same disturbing results. Lords of the Fallen is the most mixed Souls-like experiences I've ever had. Like, I love and hate it in equal measure. Despite that, I'm still very excited for the sequel. Anyway, let's talk about one of the few bosses I had a chance to fight, the Hushed Saint. At the end of the Forsaken Fen, a swamp-like area filled with decay and disease, coating the remains of a lost society, stands this boss encounter. A silent yet regal warrior on horseback who uses the bog as an extension of his very being. He can dive and reappear from anywhere inside the arena, utilizing the environment to his advantage. Beyond that, the game is quiet about his history. Sure, he has Saint in the title, and he was once known as Saint Latimer, but that's not really enough to talk about this boss. The key to his religious roots lies in the environment, the bog we fight him in. Now, for you wetland enthusiasts, I'm aware that bogs, swamps, marshes, and fens are all slightly different, but they all fall underneath the same umbrella term, wetlands. I'm saying this now so I don't get some jerk off adjusting his glasses ready to snipe me in the comment section. Anyways, bogs specifically were considered sacred liminal spaces, gateways between the human world and the other world, mostly in Iron Age Northern European religious practices, most notably for the Celtic and Germanic people. They served as sites for ritual sacrifice and votive offerings, including weapons, jewelry, and human victims, likely offered to fertility deities to secure prosperity. They were preserved surprisingly well when discovered centuries later, because bogs have a very unique combination of oxygen-free conditions, high acidity, cold temperatures, and I got this, hold on, listen. Sphagnum moss-produced tanning agents. In simple terms, these were pickled corpses, which when saying that out loud makes this sound way more disturbing, and rightfully so. Bodies that were discovered inside bogs were positioned in such ways to indicate reverence towards their deities or signs of protection when ascending into the afterlife. The royalty were sometimes draped in exquisite clothing or expensive jewelry. Others were criminals that were deemed only as a sacrifice, rather than a ritual burial for someone worthy. In the later Byzantine Empire, there was a concept of sacred borders, where certain monks or soldiers were tasked with never leaving a specific post, essentially becoming living boundary stones. When given this responsibility, their names would change into some sort of title. And what a coincidence, Saint Latimer's name changed to simply the Hushed Saint. He is protecting one of the 5 corrupted beacons in the game, so this lines up perfectly. When my time comes, I'm hoping my family has the decency to drop me into a bog, just so I can pickle for centuries to come. Yeah, that's right, pickle me Elmo. Alright, transition. The Ancestor spirit is a very unique boss with nothing that really comes close to it in Elden Ring. It's tied to an ancient religion that most characters inside the lands between have forgotten. Its appearance is that of a giant deer carcass with a phosphorescent glow. Flowers bud from the tips of its antlers, and it gives off an overall ethereal vibe. It is a physical representation of the cycle of life and death. Ancestral spirits exist as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erd Tree. Life sprouts from death, as it does from birth. Such is the way of living. A number of new growths bud from the antler-like horns of the fallen king, each glowing with light. Thus does new life grow from death, and from death, one obtains power. See, this cycle of rebirth is revered in many beliefs, but the Ancestor spirit and his followers are closest to shamanism. And it's not like one religion, but it's the OG spiritual practice. If Blasphemous was all about the high church, the Ancestor spirit is more akin to backwoods rituals, like the type of scary stories you would hear about in Reddit compilations. Now, a shaman is not like a priest, but a walker between realms. Shamans would interact with the spirit world through altered states of consciousness. The goal of this is usually to direct spirits or spiritual energies into the physical world for the purpose of healing, divination, or to aid human beings in some other way. But the horns are a key factor here. Antlers are unique because they are bone that grows outside the body, dies, falls off, and regrows even bigger. To a shaman, this is the ultimate proof of life from death. The Ancestor spirit's horns are literally budding with new life. In shamanic belief, these horns are conduits for crucible energy, the primal soup where all life was once blended together. A description from the clarifying horn charm states, the ancestral followers believed that the horns of a long-lived beast continue to bud like antlers over and over again, until the beast one day becomes an ancestral spirit. Both the ancestral followers and shaman traditions are mirrored perfectly here. Now, this is what the Ancestor spirit represents. But the question is, are there any deer gods in mythology or other religions? The answer is yes. Kurnunos, gosh, I'm gonna get so many comments. Kurnunos from Celtic beliefs was a horned god, associated with nature, wild animals, fertility, and prosperity, frequently depicted with stag antlers, and seated with crossed legs. He represents the untamed forest, regeneration, and the cycle of life and death. See, often portrayed with a ram-horned serpent, which the Ancestor spirit doesn't have, but that's still pretty cool. Both the Hushed Saint and the Ancestor spirit represent dead faiths from long ago, but it's interesting to see how their core beliefs are weaved into their designs. But what about bosses who represent an abandonment of faith? Those who choose to neglect their destiny or design to gather in selfish ambitions. Matthew 19:24. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. In Lies of P, arguably the best Souls-like game out there, I'm just saying, we find a boss named Fallen Archbishop Andreas inside the St. Frangelico Cathedral Library. Even greed can corrupt the most noble of leaders. Andreas was a man of true faith, but the gold from the alchemist group corrupted his mind and morals, which transformed the cathedral from a place of divine worship into a closed container. Over time, the Archbishop began to corrupt physically, showing signs of the petrification disease. The scariest part, however, was his own denial. He believed that his greed was not a curse. Rather, he was chosen by an angel, and this new form was a holy gift from above. During the fight, he says, "I am a one-winged angel. Only I can sense the presence of God." This pure delusion is a coping mechanism, because when he's truly defeated, he wishes to become his old self again, before the greed overtook him. His story is actually a direct historical mirror, because in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, the church often funded its grandest projects, like the real-life St. Peter's Basilica, through morally gray donations and political alliances. It just so happens Andreas's corrupted nature manifested into a bloated monster, which also has symbolism as well. He's not just a monster, he's a massive, bloated heap of flesh. In many Eastern traditions, heaviness and bloat are physical manifestations of accumulated spiritual filth. He can no longer quote-unquote ascend because he is physically weighed down by the sins of his secrets and the alchemist's gold. Ironically, Andreas referring to himself as a one-winged angel is evidence enough of his downfall. Because here's the thing, right? Wings represent divinity, symmetry, and transcendence in a lot of religions. Being an angel with one wing takes away all of that. He's broken, corrupted, and can never ascend because of the physical weight of his sins. It's truly a tragic tale because he was a man of God before the events of Lies of P. But even a holy man can be taken away by the promise of wealth. Even then, there's one more boss that I think you'll view in a slightly different way after I explain them. The Twin Princes from Dark Souls 3 don't harbor any religious imagery in their fight or even in their design. They have no reason to really be on this list, but I like to find the impossible in things like this, and sometimes it doesn't work. But I truly think I found, possibly, the most terrifying representation of religion so far. See, the younger brother, Lothric, was destined to become a Lord of Cinder, someone who would sacrifice themselves to the first flame to ignite the fire, to uphold their age of fire once again. However, he was born sickly and frail, not even outgrowing his baby clothing. So the former king and queen combined the elder brother, Lorien's soul, with Lothric to create a champion worthy of linking the flame. Now this worked, but Lothric, under the teachings of Uldia, the sentient bonfire guy, decided to not only abandon his destiny, but to retreat back into his chambers to await the end of the world. Lothric and Lorien are a representation of a Christ-like figure who said no, the one true hope for humanity who chose to do nothing, to sit alone at the pinnacle of their abandoned kingdom and be still. Again, there's nothing else connecting these two characters to religious imagery, but the idea of a savior who said no to his supposed people is terrifying to think about. Like, imagine being a follower of Lothric only to realize he's rejecting you and just dooming the whole world. It's complete anarchy. Well, what about Lorien? Was he not fit to become a champion? According to the lore, not really. He did slay demons, and even his sword burns with an ancient flame from bathing in the blood of the demon princes, which he defeated alone, by the way, but still, he wasn't chosen. As a matter of fact, he was sacrificed. In the midst of merging their souls together, he became crippled and mute, unable to do anything besides staying loyal to his privileged younger brother. It's a story of denying destiny, and when someone with that much responsibility does that, it creates chaos unlike any other. These bosses are very intriguing to me, and hopefully to you as well. I absolutely adore religious imagery and cults in video games, so talking about their inspirations or details behind their traditions is something I would love to keep doing. That being said, I've only covered 6 bosses out of all the Souls-like bosses that exist, or even bosses from other games. So a part 2 can definitely happen if you guys would like to see that. Just let me know. And of course, if you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and to subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care everyone, and of course, stay safe.